Okay, I will start by explaining about Model United Nations first. So the first time when I was a student in college, I was first introduced about Model United Nations by one of my seniors, right? And when I first heard about Model United Nations, or as we called it as MUN, I was not really familiar with the whole process, right? I was not familiar with the whole picture of the first step, the second step, the third step, and all the way to the final step. I was not familiar because I did not know exactly what MUN was. So by not knowing what MUN is, perhaps I will make sure that you guys understand that. So that you don't do the same mistake that I did perhaps 4 years ago. Okay. So about MUN is clearly a simulation, but it's not just a simulation of the whole United Nations system, right? The same goes with People's Representative Council, right? Or perhaps in the United States, they have United States Congress, right? And in other countries, they have their own names, but basically, the People's Representative Council or People's Representative Assembly, when you want to simulate one of their proceedings, you're going to have to refer to one of their committee meetings, right? For example, in Indonesia, we have Commission 1, Commission 2, right? Commission 3 until Commission whatever. I don't know how many numbers there are, but basically when we want to simulate a certain proceeding, a certain room, a certain conference inside of a council, inside of an institution, we're going to have to refer to a specific committee proceedings, right? For example, in MUN, we do not simulate the whole United Nations system because first, United Nations is so big, you're going to have to pick one particular conference, right? One particular simulation conference of the exact proceeding. For example, you may have heard about United Nations Human Rights Council, or perhaps you may have heard about United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or perhaps you may even have heard about United Nations Environmental Program. So these United Nations councils are the councils that you will have to simulate in MUN. So you're not going to simulate the whole UN system. You're not going to simulate the whole UN organization, no. But you're going to have to simulate one of their committees or councils. So you're going to have to understand that first. Once you understand that, it's going to be easier for you to understand the whole picture of MUN, right? And once you are inside a conference in MUN, you are not representing yourself. Okay, you're not representing your family, but you're representing the whole country. If I am participating as a delegate of Indonesia, for example, as the representative of Indonesia, then my reaction, right? My comments, my address, or anything that I will say in that conference is going to represent the aspirations of the whole Indonesian country, right? Or for example, if I'm representing Malaysia, I will be talking on behalf of the country of Malaysia, and I'm not just talking about myself, right? And it goes with other countries as well. When you are participating in an MUN, you're going to have to make sure that the whole picture of MUN, the whole picture of simulation, you understand all of that before you make your first speech, before you make your second speech, right? If you take a look at the presentation here, you're going to have an opportunity to experience, right, a practical global policymaking process. When you are experiencing this, you're going to have to realize yourself, you're going to have to position yourself as a policymaker, right? When you are participating in a conference as a policymaker, what you will say is going to affect the policy of your country, is going to affect perhaps the policies of other countries. So you're going to have to understand, you're going to have to play a role as a diplomat in order for you to understand the topic as well as the solution of that topic that is becoming the issue, right? So now you understand that you are participating as a diplomat. You also understand that you will talk about a certain topic or issue. And at the same time, you understand that you're going to have to talk about the solution of all of those issues. So we are not participating only to talk about the issues. We are also participating to talk about both the issues and the solutions to overcome that issue. Okay, so we're gonna have to come up with ideas. We're gonna have to come up with ways to combat the problem. How are we going to fix the problem? How are we going to repair the problem? These are the questions that you're gonna have to answer when you participate in MUN. Okay, so that's the brief introduction. I hope it's understandable. Anyone wants to ask a question about the first slide, because we still have, upcoming slides in the next minute. So if you have a question, please do ask a question. You may unmute your mic, or if you want to send your question via Zoom chat box, it's also allowed. It's feel free for you to ask a question. Any question? Okay, no questions so far. Okay, so now the definition. About the definition. When we want to learn about something, it's better for us to understand the basic definitions, right? If we are, for example, let's say, I'm participating in an activity about ocean conservation, for example. I need to know the definition of conservation, right? I need to know the definition of ocean. What does it mean to conserve the ocean, right? Or if I'm, for example, you're in high school right now, or you're in college, you're taking a new subject, right? You're taking a new subject, and you never know the meaning of the subject, right? The name of the subject. You've never heard of it. And now that you have never heard of that name of the subject, you're gonna have to research about the name first, right? Before you dive into the deep knowledge on that subject, right? You're gonna have to learn the basics. And the same thing goes with MUN. You're gonna have to understand the definition. We have to know what is a council, what is a study guide, what is a position paper, and what is a draft resolution. These are the definitions that we are going to go through today, to make sure that you understand the very basic definitions of terms used in MUN. Okay, the first one is council or committee. When you are simulating in an MUN, again, what I have said earlier, you're not simulating the whole UN organization. You're only simulating one of UN's councils or committees. And the example of that is a lot, actually. We have UN Women, you have UN Security Council, perhaps you have heard of UNICEF, right? UNESCO, UNDP, what again? UN, there's a lot of UN, right? But not every council starts with UN. There's a council that does not start with a UN. For example, ILO. Anyone has heard about ILO? ILO is International Labor Organization. And any other more councils and committees in United Nations system that we can simulate in an MUN. And you can also open one of the pictures that I've sent earlier. That's the whole United Nations chart, right? We have the General Assembly, we have the Economic and Social Council, we have the whole system of MUN that is easily seen by a chart. So you can understand your position of your council is, oh, the position of this council is here, the position of this council is there. So you're gonna have to understand about each council and each organization, what are their duties, what are their responsibilities, what is the difference between the United Nations Development Program and the United Nations Environmental Program. What are the two differences? What do they do, right? And by knowing the committees, by knowing the councils, you're gonna understand the whole function of that organization, right? For example, in UNHRC, United Nations Human Rights Council, to what extent can this council talk about human rights? Does this council only discuss about certain human rights, or does this council talk about any kind of human rights, including human rights violations inside of a country? Or does this council only address human rights violations in international level? What kind of responsibilities does the United Nations Human Rights Council has? That's the question that you're going to have to ask yourself. And that's in a form of what we call as research. You're going to have to research when you want to represent a country in MUN. Oh, and one surprising note for those of you who haven't known, you are not going to represent, for example, if you're Indonesian, you're not going to represent Indonesia necessarily. If you're Malaysian, you're not going to necessarily represent Malaysia. You may receive country that you have never heard of. My first country was Mexico, right? That's the country that actually I have no idea what. I know Mexico, but I have no idea of what Mexico does to this topic, right? Perhaps it's going to be a different situation if the country is coming from the Southeast Asian region, for example, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. Perhaps we're still more familiar with what they do. But for countries outside of Southeast Asia, for countries outside of Asia, perhaps it's going to be hard for us to understand their stance, to understand their point of view in certain conditions. And if we do not do our research, it's going to be very hard. Okay, so the first thing, right? The first thing that you have to do by researching is by understanding the second definition, which is study guide. So study guide is a guide, basically a guide that is made by the chair, right? For research and also further preparation of your conference before you start your conference. So there's a word chair, right? Made by chair. So who is the chair? Are we talking about chair as in furniture, or what kind of chair that we're talking here? Okay, so for chair is the board of people, right? They're the ones who actually will lead the simulation of the conference. They will be the one who is moderating the whole session, right? They will decide who will speak. They will decide which topic to be chosen, and they will also decide which one is going to be the main topic, the main idea of the simulation. And all of that can be seen in a study guide. So the study guide functions as a guidebook for all of you to read before the conference starts. Once you have all of this, once you have researched and also read the study guide, it's going to be easier for you to make your points. It's easier for you to make a summary out of your country's point of view in a certain topic. Okay, so I know it's a lot, but just understand easily that study guide is basically a book, a guidebook that is made by the chair that contains information all related to your council. Okay, I hope it's understandable. Number 3, position paper. Position paper, right? Position paper is a paper that is made by each member state, by each country, before the conference starts. So for the conference to start, you're gonna have to make your position paper first. Okay, by making your position paper, you're gonna have more insights about your country's situation in a certain topic, right? Remember that when you are participating in MUN, there's always one country that you represent, and also there's one topic that all countries will address. So one topic for all countries, but every country is going to receive different countries, right? Every delegate is going to receive different countries, but the topic that is discussed is going to be the same. For example, if we are simulating the MUN conference of the World Health Organization, right? I believe everyone must have heard about WHO. So the World Health Organization, one of its functions is to make sure that they coordinate the whole policies of the world, the whole global policies, to follow what they recommend the best. For example, in the case of COVID-19, the World Health Organization helps a lot of countries in, for example, drafting recommendations of the health protocols, right? In drafting recommendations in how we approach or how we combat the issue of COVID-19. So these kind of approach that is made by the World Health Organization, right, is the kind of gesture, right, that you have to do in your position paper. But you're going to have to use the lens, you're going to have to use the perspective of a country and not a council. So if the COVID-19 is the topic, then your position paper is going to be about how you see that virus, right? How you address the problem of that virus in your country. What did you do to overcome the issue of COVID-19? Did you, for example, did you in Indonesia, did you apply social restriction programs to your areas, or do you limit 100%? Do you make sure that economic activities are all prohibited from happening? Or are you following a hybrid approach, right? Are you following a gray area where you want both the economy and also the health system of our country goes hand in hand, right? There's a lot of approach, right? A lot of approaches that you can make. For example, in order for you to actually grasp, right, the understanding of a certain country in understanding about something. Okay, so that's the third thing. The fourth thing is that the draft resolution. Draft resolution is basically the whole summary of your MUN conference, right? You're gonna have to write, you're gonna have to draft, you're gonna have to compile all the agreements that you make, right, with other countries. And remember that this is a politics, right? This is politics where you're gonna have to approach certain countries to make a draft resolution, right? I will explain earlier, but basically draft resolution is a summary of the information or the agreements or the insights or the knowledge that you agree by your other delegates as well, alongside other delegates as well, to make it into a formal document that is going to be finalized by the chair. Once that it is finalized, it's going to be a resolution that applies to all countries, whether they like it or not, as long as they're the member of the UN, right? So that's a simple picture of how draft resolution goes, right? So these are the four definitions that you're going to have to learn. These are the four definitions that you're going to have to understand, because these are the basic definitions in MUN that if you understand, it's going to be easier for you to go into your first MUN. Okay? Okay. Any question before I move on to the next slides? Okay, there's one from Hansa. Hansa asked a question. When we're participating in MUN, is it okay that we don't have any related education background for the organization? Or can we represent the country that will be depending about what organization that will choose and bring topics that relate to it? Okay, Hansa, this is a very good question. The first one is you don't have to have a related education or background in a certain topic or a certain organization. For example, I'm coming from law. I'm coming from the legal background, right? That does not mean that I can only participate in legal organizations or organizations that are related to law. If you are, for example, a student in medical program, it does not mean that you cannot participate in a human rights council, right? The same thing goes vice versa. Even though I'm coming from the social science major, right? I can still join the World Health Organization simulation where we talk about medical issues, something that perhaps I'm not so familiar with. But in an MUN, it is allowed for you to do that. It's okay for you to do that, because this is actually the time for you to learn all the things that you have never heard of, including medical terms, including, for example, legal issues, including, for example, politics, right? This is the time for you to learn. So to answer Hans's question, first question, can we participate in MUN if we don't have the related background? The answer is yes. Second question, is the country decided by you or by the committee? The answer is that you don't choose the country, right? You cannot choose your own preferred country. Oh, I want to represent New Zealand. I want to represent the Philippines. I want to represent India. I want to represent Saudi Arabia. You cannot do that. Sadly, you cannot do that. Because in an MUN, the one that will be deciding your country is going to be both the chair and also the committee. The committee is the one that organizes the whole conference, while the chair is the board of people, right? The board of people who will be simulating and also moderating the session. Okay. but they're not participating as a delegate. They're only participating as, you know, someone or people who lead the debate, but they will not be participating substantially. They will not give a speech. They will not debate with one of us. They will not negotiate. What they do is basically leading and also moderating the debate. Okay, Hansa, thank you so much for your question. It's a really good question. I will move to the next slide. Now, this is the second definition that you have to know. So I mentioned a lot about chairs, right? Now I'm gonna move myself over here. Okay, this one, the three people that you see in front, right, in front of the projector, these people are what we call as chair. They are not, again, they're not participating as a delegate. They're participating as someone who leads and moderates the debate. Okay. The second term is placard. Placard is the one that this young lady here is holding, right? It's actually, well, this is not applicable in online MUN, okay? But this is applicable when we still had offline MUNs. In offline MUN, whenever you want to talk, you're gonna have to raise your placard. You cannot just say what you want, whenever you want, however you want. You cannot. Why? Because first, you are meeting with people who are not coming from the same country, right? They're not all of them. They're not your friends. They're not someone that you know so well. You're gonna have to maintain respect. You're gonna have to maintain diplomacy in front of these people, right? So whenever you want to talk, whenever you want to debate, whenever you want to give an argument, you're gonna have to raise your placard first, so that the chair knows that, oh, Abdul wants to talk. Oh, he wants to talk. I will tag him. I will remember him whenever I allow someone again to talk. But when Abdul holds the placard, it does not mean that he can quickly or immediately say what he wants by raising the placard. No, you're gonna have to raise your placard, wait until your name is mentioned by the chair, and that's when you lower down your hair, you put back again the placard, and that's when you talk. If someone wants to reply to your address, if someone wants to reply to your speech, they're gonna have to do the same. They have to raise the placard, and when the chair lets him or her, they're gonna have to lower and put back the placard, and they can reply you. This is how we maintain respect and diplomacy in an MUN, right? We're gonna have to respect each other, right? You don't want people to bash you when you're talking, right? You don't want to be cut when you are giving a speech, right? You want people to hear, you want people to listen. You're gonna have to do the same, all right? You're gonna have to do the same with other people so that they can be treated the way you want to be treated. Okay, that's the second definition. The third one is delegate. Okay, delegate is easy. Basically, people or any person who comes as a delegate is anyone who researches, anyone who will give a speech, anyone that will draft a resolution. Basically, an applicant in a competition. If you have participated in, for example, in a competition, in speech competition, perhaps one of you has participated in a speech competition. There's a lot of these applicants, right? A lot of speech givers that will wait for their.
Udah ke belum itu angkat Puji?
Okay, wait.
Dia dibilang.
Okay, wait. I'm gonna unmute. Okay, Muji, I'm so sorry. I will unmute the audio. Okay, nice. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll continue. So where was I? Okay, delegate. Delegate is basically, again, basically someone who participates, right? A participant in a competition. That's the one that I'm trying to say. Participant in a competition. If you are participating in speech competition, right, you're gonna meet other participants as well. But the juries, right, the board of juries or the judges, they're not participants, right? They will judge us. They will decide our score. They will choose who wins, but they're not participating as a participant. The same goes with chairs. Chairs are not the participant. They only simulate, they only lead the debate. They will decide who will speak. They will decide which topic is to be talked about, but they will not be participating as a delegate. The key differences. Okay. Okay, I see we have 20 minutes left. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is the flow of the debate. Okay, this is the the main idea, the main question of the day, right? So how does MUN go? We understand earlier the basic definitions. We understand about the sequences of MUN, but this time we're talking about the flow of the debate. The first one is roll call. Roll call is basically a session where your country's name will be called, right? And all you have to do is to state your presence, whether you're present or present and voting. This will be explained. This will be explained earlier after this. After a roll call, there's a general speakers list. This is where you give a speech. In a roll call, you don't give a speech. You only state whether you're present or not. But in general speakers list, this is where you give a speech for the first time. This is where you give your opening speech, right? But the speech is limited to only talking about the condition of your country for your first general speakers list. You're only addressing the problems inside your country when you are giving your first opening speech. You cannot talk about other country situation because that's not the situation for number 2, for the second flow. So, sir, where do we talk about other people's issues? I mean, as you mentioned earlier, this is politics, right? We will talk about each other's problems. So where can we or when can we talk about that? The answer is here, number 3, moderated caucus. This is where you are allowed to, basically talk about other countries, messes, right? You can talk about other countries' messes. You can talk about the solution, right? You can address the problem. You can perhaps, give an argument, right? Or debate the country who's producing a lot of troubles, for example. This is where you do it, right? In number 3. But what's the difference between number 3 and number 4? If you take a look at the pictures, take a look at the pictures. Number 3, everyone is sitting, right? Everyone is sitting. Everyone's just, putting a good smiley face. But when you are participating in unmoderated caucus, number 4, this is where everything is becoming fierce, right? This is where everything is becoming, lively, because you can stand up from your seat, right? You can approach any delegates that you want. You can talk about anything. You can speak about anything. There will be no limitation of time, right? There will only be a total time, but there will not be a limited time for every individual. You can talk with anyone. You can talk with any country. It's up to you. But in moderated caucus, everything is limited, right? Everything is limited, and as the name goes, this is moderated by the chair, right? In unmoderated, again, it's not moderated by the chair. So you're not going to have to wait to, raise your placard whenever you want to talk, okay? Because it's unmoderated. It's unmoderated. The last step is the voting part, the voting procedure. This is where you vote for your resolution, okay? This is where you vote for your draft resolution. So as I have mentioned earlier in the definition part, we have draft resolution, right? Which is a compilation or summary of all the things that you have discussed about in MUN. It will be made into a compilation of resolutions, right? And there will be more than one resolution. So you're gonna have to vote. You're gonna have to choose which resolution is to be passed. So this is actually the way how you approach one another, right? Because it's a politics, you're gonna have to negotiate with other countries, right? You're gonna have to deal with other countries. You're gonna have to talk with countries that perhaps you don't want to talk to, but you're gonna have to talk with them because you have to gain their trust. You're gonna have to, make sure that they join our side. Make sure that their solutions are in line with our solution. So this is the biggest difference between voting procedure and the debate session. Number 2, number 3, number 4 is what we call as debate sessions. But number 5, the last one, the last flow, this is where you vote for the resolution, right? And will be, I will say, the most interesting part of the session because it will be very, very dramatic, right? It's very dramatic. And also it's going to be very, very, full of debates as well, even though voting is not actually made for debating, but there will be a lot of debating there. And it's really exciting if you actually see it from the big picture. Okay, so that's the flow of the debate. The debate starts with roll call, ends with voting procedure. Any question before I move on to the next slide? I hope it's understandable, because it's quite complicated when you are just first introducing a new one. Okay, if there's no more question, I will move on to the next slide. So moving back again to the first part, this roll call. So when you are in a roll call, you have two questions, right? The first one is, can you say that you're present, or can you say that you're present voting? The answer is that you can choose either one. You can say that you're present, or you can say that you're present and voting. What's the difference between present and voting? Present is basically you're saying that I want to be abstain. I want to abstain somewhere in the middle of the conference, right? But when you're saying the present and voting, it means that you are not only present, but you're also voting, right? You're not only present, but you're also voting. That means you're going to have to state whether you are agreeing to something or whether you are disagreeing to something. You cannot do an abstain vote, right? If you take a look at the explanation below, you can see that the present means that you may abstain in substantial voting. So the abstain part is only possible when you are in a substantial voting. Okay. In a substantial voting, it means that the resolution that you're currently debating is what we call a substantial voting, right? Procedural is more about deciding the motion, right? When we're talking about which topic to be discussed, right? When we're talking about, do you agree with a certain topic to be discussed? This is actually what we call as procedural procedure, right? Procedural voting is there. You cannot abstain. You're going to have to state whether you agree or whether you disagree to a topic. But when you are in substantial voting, you have the option to not say yes or to not say no. You can say abstain, right? You can state that, okay, I'm not agreeing to this, but also I'm not disagreeing to this. I'm taking a gray area. I'm abstaining. It's possible only if substantial voting and only if you state that you are only present and not present in voting. That's the key difference, right? In a roll call. Okay, so that will be roll call. Okay, there's a question from Hansa. When we are able to have a speech, how many times will we be provided to talk? Okay, so there is no limited time for you to have a speech, right? You can have as many speeches as you want. But again, it's up to the chair, right? So if you are, for example, offering yourself that you want to do a speech, for example, like 5 times, right? You're raising your placard for 5 times. It does not mean that you will speak for 5 times. Perhaps you'll only speak for 1 time or 2 times or 3 times. It's not always that whenever you raise your placard, it basically means that you're accepted. No, because the chair has a lot of considerations to choose the speaker. Perhaps they want to choose, you know, as inclusive as possible. They want to make sure that all countries have the same level, all countries have the same ability to speak, they all have the same accessibility to speak. Then they will spread the whole opportunities to every country. So perhaps you're going to have to wait for your turn, right? So this is the key difference, right? The key difference between wanting to talk and when you're actually allowed to talk by the chair. Okay, so Hans, I hope it answers your question. I'm going to move on to general speakers list. So again, as I have mentioned, this is a speaker session where you can talk about general topics. There are no specific topics to be discussed, only general topics. You can reaffirm your stance, right? You can do a 90 seconds general speakers list, but you're not actually, encourage, well, you don't have to. So that's the one that I'm searching for. You don't have to do a 90-second speech, right? You can do a 60 seconds. You can do a 45 seconds. But the remaining time can be yielded. It can be yielded to other delegates. You can send the remaining time of yours to other delegates to speak. You can also send it back to the chair, which means that you're not using your remaining time. You want others to take their turn. So you're basically abolishing your remaining time, yielding it back to the chair. The last one is POI. POI stands for points of information. This is basically the session where you can ask or you can be asked by other delegates. So if you are yielding your time for a question and answer, it means that you're opening a question and answer session. But how long will the session take? It will depend on the remaining time that you yield. If you're yielding 30 seconds, then the time for you to answer the question is 30 seconds. When the delegates are asking a question, it's not quantified as the remaining time, because the remaining time will only start when they are when the country who was opening the session is answering the questions. Okay, so that's the key difference between yielding time to points of information. Okay, a lot of knowledge, I know. It's very complicated. So anyone who wants to ask a question, please do so by unmuting yourself or giving it to the Zoom chat box. Since we only have 10 more minutes left. Okay, no more question. Okay, this is basically the do's and don'ts. You don't have to talk about two specific topics. You don't have to do that. Only tell your country stance briefly. Only tell the background issues briefly. Tell your solution briefly, right? But don't be repetitive, right? Don't repeat what other delegates have mentioned earlier or have addressed earlier. You're gonna have to be yourself, right? You're gonna have to represent your country, so you cannot be repetitive to other delegates. Don't speak too long. Again, don't speak too specific. Again, as the name goes, general speakers list. It's not specific speakers list. So you're going to have to talk as general as possible. Okay. That's the general speakers list. This is the moderated caucus. Okay, so this is the third part, right? Roll call, general speakers list, moderated caucus. Again, in a moderated caucus, it contains more specific topics, right? And this is the time where you are proposing a topic. You can propose a topic to the chair, but your proposal will not be automatically accepted because we're going to have to vote for that. And the voting requirement is that you're going to have 50% plus one vote. So if there are 30 delegates present in the council, the minimum requirement for a motion to pass is 50% plus one of that total number. If it is 30, then the 50% plus one is going to be 16, right? So you're going to have to receive 16 minimum yeses, 16 minimum countries to agree on your motion for your motion to be passed. Okay. But apart from the minimum vote, you're going to have to make sure that your turn is not at the back. You're going to have to make sure that your turn is decided when no country is preceding you. Okay, so that's the key difference between moderated caucus and the general speakers list. There is no voting in general speakers list. Everything is decided by the chair. In moderated caucus, it's on the floor's decision to talk about a certain topic, to talk about a certain issue. It will always be voted by the floor and not by the chair. The chair will only be moderating, but he or she will not be interfering to the voting procedure session. Okay. So that's the moderated caucus. This is the template for you to say your caucus, right? Your proposal of the caucus. You're gonna have to mention your name of the country that you're representing. You're gonna have to mention how many times, the total times, and then you will have to propose the speaking time for each individual, for each country, right? And then after that, the topic of the motion. Basically, it's a long template, but once you master it, it's gonna be easier to be understood. Delegate of France would like to propose a moderated caucus for 10 minutes total time with 1 minute speaking time each with the topic of deciding the root causes. So total time is the time that you're proposing to the chair. Hey chair, let's go with 10-minute discussion. But since this is moderated caucus and everyone will have their turn, we're going to have to decide the speaking time for each delegate. In this case, France delegation, they agreed to have a 1 minute speaking time each. If we have 10-minute total time with 1 minute speaking time for each individual, it means that there will be 10 delegates who can participate in this motion from France to talk about the root causes of the issue. So voting is a crucial part of MUN. It represents majority. It represents the decisions made by the member states. It represents basically the full picture of what's going on. So it's very important for you to understand this. Okay. Any question for moderated caucus before we move on to the unmoderated caucus session? Okay, from I. There's a question from I. If someone gives a speech in general speakers list Are other delegates allowed to participate or address him without doing the raising of placard? The answer is no. So in a general speakers list, we cannot address one another by raising the placard. We can only do that in moderated caucus. Okay, we can only do that in moderated caucus. In a general speakers list, there already a specified list of countries who will have a speech. From the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, until the last one, the chair has already decided on that. And what we can do is to wait for our turn or participate or address their questions when they are yielding their time to question and answer. So, responding to I's question, can we participate or address him? Well, basically no. But if they are yielding their time for question and answer, that well, then there's a time for you to address him or her, but only in a form of question, not debating. You can only ask a question in a question and answer session. You cannot debate the answer, or you cannot debate the person that you are asking. That's the job of moderated caucus, not for general speakers list. Okay, so I hope it answered your question. I thank you so much for the question. So, any other delegates who wants to ask a question? Okay, we have 7 minutes left. Okay, I hope I can make this. Okay, this is not that important. Okay, unmoderated. Basically, as you can see from the picture, you can go anywhere. But since we're facing the pandemic, we can only do online MUN. Basically, what we do is that we can go into breakout rooms, right? There will be breakout rooms available. You can move from one to another. So no limitation on who you can talk to. Okay, you can only propose the time. You don't need to specify the topic. You don't need to specify the speaking time, the total time. No, you can only propose for the total entire time of the unmoderated caucus. But what do we do exactly in unmoderated caucus? What we do is that we form a block. We find friends. We find countries who share the same perspective as us. That's actually the function of unmoderated caucus. Sir, can we just do that in a moderated caucus? Well, yeah, you can do that. But in unmoderated caucus, everything goes faster, right? Everything goes more dynamic. So once something is going faster, you have to keep up, right? You're going to have to keep up with the pace. And you do that by participating in unmoderated caucus and also actively asking, actively negotiating with other delegates so that they want to be with us. They want to be with our block, right? That's the function of unmoderated caucus. And as the saying goes, this one, as the saying goes, you're gonna have to still be diplomatic, but don't be too dominant. Don't be too dominant because you're not there to taking over everything. You're there as a delegate. You're there as a country, right? Make sure that people respect your country by being diplomatic and listen to others. Create a block, right? And don't cut someone when they speak. This is very rude. Don't cut someone when they speak. Make sure that you are as polite as possible because trust me, when you're being a polite delegate, everyone will like you and eventually the chair will like you. So be someone, right? Be a delegate who actually respects one another. Okay, I'm the caucus. So okay, tips for speech is basically, you know, when you're giving a speech, make sure that everything is clear, right? Don't do too much of hum, right? Uh, there's a lot of delegates who do that. For example, okay, I will we will talk about the question of this. That's a lot of hums, right? There's a lot of unnecessary hums in your speech. Make sure you remove all of that. Make sure you speak clearly, you speak fluently, and also don't speak too fast. Because everyone is coming from different countries, right? Their first language is not English. So don't expect everyone to understand in the same pace. Okay? That's how you prepare your speech. Grab attention, structured well, clear and on point. That's how you make your first speech in MUN. The other do's, these are the formal suits. You're gonna have to use third person. You're gonna have to research, right? Be diplomatic. Oh, most importantly, research. Research is very important because, again, as I've mentioned, you cannot know the full picture of that country if you don't do the research. And also since you're not coming from that country, you're not a citizen of that country, then you're gonna have to do a very, very thorough research, right? By researching the mandatory, information that you need to know from that country, right? And also in MUN, we're gonna have to use third person, right? We cannot say I, we cannot say me, right? We have to use we, or we mention our country. Indonesia believes that COVID should be blah, 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 right? We, the delegate of France, believes that blah, 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 blah. Never say, I believe, or I think, or in my opinion. Don't do that. Remember, you're representing a country, not yourself. So use a third person pronoun that refers to your country. In this case, we, right? Or just the name of the country. Okay. It's very important. Okay. Okay, I think this is the last one. Okay, don't wear casual t-shirts. Don't wear t-shirts like I'm the one wearing right now. Never wear a t-shirt. Always use a full, blazer or a full suit. Make sure you look great in front of the camera, and don't talk without the chair's permission. Never talk if you are never allowed by the chair. Don't be too late. Don't sleep too late, and also don't panic. Take everything easily. In Indonesia we call it santai, right? Dibikin santuy aja. Just make everything chill as possible. Okay, when you are not panicking, it will be easier for you to process everything, right? When you're panicking, it's hard for you to process a lot of information. So make sure you don't panic in an MUN. Well, basically in every part of your life, but particularly in MUN, don't panic. Okay, so that's the tips for research. You can read this by yourself. Basically, never research, you know, to the point where you only research about certain information only. Make sure that you research the whole process. If we're talking about COVID, maybe you want to research about the COVID-19 first case, right, in the world. If you're talking about vaccination, maybe you want to research about the efficacy of the vaccines. You want to research about the company who produces the vaccines. Are they bona fide companies? Are they competent companies to produce a vaccine that will be used by many people? You're gonna have to ask that question a lot. Okay. Okay. Last one. Okay. This is there's a homework. I know everyone is there's a homework. Remember. Okay. So this is one note for me. You don't have to do your homework, right? You are not encouraged to, be present at all times and do all homework. No. If you are currently busy with your school, if you're currently busy with your campus, with your, I don't know, projects, business even, you don't have to do your homework. This homework is done for those who wants to do the homework. Okay. So what's the homework? The homework is that you can make a research about anything in a form of anything. You can make an essay, make a list, presentation, infographics, anything. I want it to contain research summary of something from the perspective of one country. So you pick your country, and then you pick your topic, and then you research on that. Once you have all of that information, make it into in a form of essay, into a list. I will not put a minimum number of pages or a minimum number of anything. You can have as many paper as you want, as many pages as you want. Also, you can have as less pages as you want. It's very okay. What I want to make sure is that you research about something and you know how to research about it. Okay. You can send the homework personally to me or via group chat if you want to, and I will review your homework and you will receive feedback from me. Okay. That will be the last thing. I will close today's session, but perhaps before I close, any question about today's material? How about best delegate? Is there any requirement? Okay, Safira, this is a really good question. How do you become a the best delegate? You become a best delegate by occupying 4 skills. The first one is research. The second one is negotiation. The third one is speech. The fourth one is drafting. As a chair, right, I'm a former chair. I'm a former chair. I'm also a former delegate. I have achieved several best delegates, so I can set a criteria where basically, generally, chairs actually search for delegates who are proactive, right, in any part of the session. So they're not waiting to be called. They want themselves to be called. They raise their placard actively. right? They lead the block. They lead their delegates. They lead the drafting of the resolution. They basically do everything, but also not to be too dominant, right? Don't be too dominant when you are expecting a best delegate award, right? Because actually chairs also see the maintain of respect by a delegate. They also see delegates who actually make sure that everyone is involved. I think that's a very good score to determine who is the best delegate. But basically, it's the four skills, right? Drafting, speech, negotiation, and also research. Four skills that you're gonna have to have in order for you to have a best delegate award. Okay. Okay, I see a lot of questions. It's really fun. Okay. The second one is from Hansa. Have you experienced a blank out when you propose the topics in front of the delegates? Sometimes I even blank out when I'm moderating this class, right? Sometimes I don't know a particular vocabulary to describe something. So what I do is that I'm gonna have to circle around something, and until I find the vocabulary, then I will repeat it again. But when it comes to MUN, have I ever experienced a blank out when you're proposing a topic? The answer is definitely yes. Not everyone is starting with, perfect presentation, right? When I first started my MUM, I'm not as confident as I am right now having a speech in English, right? As an Indonesian, as someone whose first language is not English, and as someone who is born in a city where English is not actually a daily language, it's very hard for me to understand English, right? And when I first experienced the blank out, right, it's actually kind of scary, but when you're scared, you're actually will you will actually encourage yourself to find the answer in a very short limited of time, right? When you're panicking, somehow some way you will find a solution, right? When you're panicking, there's always this way that you you receive an answer of something after you're panicking. So I'm not saying you have to panic. No, don't panic. But when you are panicking, right, make sure that you don't panic too much, because it will disturb the whole concentration in your brain. And once you don't have your concentration, you will not be able to focus clearly on something. Okay. So make sure you don't panic. Next question from IE again. Sometimes there's a lot of policy in a particular state which we delegated is not accessible to another citizen. Okay, so when you don't have a lot of information about a particular policy that is not accessible, make sure that you find other sources. So if you cannot find the sources from the government about, for example, COVID-19, make sure you have the sources from international media or international organization outside of that country. Or perhaps if you want to still to do a research on that country inside of that country, find a source from the media of that country or find a source from the other institution of that country. You will be able to find your information about something, right? Make sure you research every place. Don't research only in one place. Make sure you research all places, as many as possible. Okay. Okay. Last one. Is the country that we research must be the same on the rewrite registration? The answer is okay. When you're writing your country in your registration, the committee will not necessarily give you that country. They will assess first, they will decide first, and perhaps you may even have a country that you are not choosing from the start. So be prepared to have any kind of country that you are probably receiving. And then the question is, do we have to research the same with the one that we're registering? No, you don't. You have to wait until the announcement of that country. Once you have your country allocated, then you can do your research there. So never do a research when you don't even know what country you're representing. Okay, it's very important. Okay, any more question? So this will be the homework. It's not obligatory, it's not mandatory, only for those who are able to do it. You can have your research about a certain topic of a certain country. Make it in a form of a very simple essay, simple list, right? Make sure that it's readable, make sure that I can understand it so that I can know how far you have research about the topic. Yes, Nismat, the answer is yes. It has to be written in English. Okay, every assignment is written in English. Okay, so make sure it is written in English, because in MUN, you're gonna have to do the same as well. Position paper, draft resolution, everything is written in English. Okay, so that question is coming from Nismat. Any other question from anyone before I close the session? Because this is Saturday, right? I understand you want to, you know, be in your bed and everything. So if you have any question again after this, you can just ask your, perhaps your group's facilitator, or if you want to ask directly to me, you can personally chat me or mention me in the group, so that I know that I mentioned, so that the notification pops up, right? Because I have other classes to moderate as well. I'm really afraid that the chat will drown. So make sure that you mention me when you want to ask me a question in a group chat. Okay. But if you feel more comfortable in asking me personally, then you can just give me a personal chat as well.